What would you do if you discovered that something terrifying lurked behind bright lights and loud laughter? In the cold winter of 1923, residents on the outskirts of St. Petersburg experienced this firsthand. The flickering lights of a circus tent in the twilight seemed like a beacon of joy during difficult times. But behind every sound of applause hid a whisper of horror. Behind every clown's smile lurked a predator's snarl. The air around the circus was saturated not only with the smell of caramel and sawdust, but also with something metallic, something Swedish, something elusively disturbing. If this story affects you as much as it has affected me, I invite you to follow my channel, where I talk about the darkest secrets of our history, those that often remain buried in archives. I discovered the first traces of this story while studying old newspaper clippings in the city archive of St. Petersburg. I've always been interested in strange incidents from the early years of Soviet power when the chaos of the revolution had not yet given way to strict order. And in these cracks in history, events often occurred that did not fit into the official chronicle. In a yellowed folder labeled Unsolved Cases, 1923, I came across a series of notes about mass disappearances on the outskirts of the city. But what caught my attention was not the disappearances themselves, but the fact that they coincided with the arrival of a traveling circus in the city. The Orloff brothers' circus arrived in St. Petersburg in early February of 1923. Contrary to usual practice, they set up their tent not in the city center but on the outskirts, in a working-class district where mainly poor people lived. The newspaper Petrogradskia Pravda wrote, "An unusually bright circus will delight the working class with excellent performances at affordable prices." The first performances were indeed accessible to everyone. The posters even stated that for the poorest, admission was free. They just needed to go to the back door of the tent after the main show. This detail, so insignificant then, makes me shudder now. A witness, Maria Ivanovna Sorokina, a 16-year-old girl at the time of the events, whose memories I found in the archive of the Memorial Society, said, "The circus appeared as if out of nowhere. In the evening, the wasteland behind the factory was empty, and in the morning, there was already a huge tent of red and gold color, so bright that it hurt to look at it. And everywhere there were people in strange costumes with pale faces, but smiling, very smiling. They handed out candy to the children and invited everyone to the evening performance. My friend Anya went to the free performance for the poor. That was the last I heard of her." In the first weeks, the disappearances were rare and mainly limited to the homeless, street children, and lonely old people, those whose absence would hardly be noticed. In the difficult post-revolutionary years, when hunger and typhus took thousands of lives, a few new disappearances did not cause much concern. But then other people started disappearing. Leonid Alexeyevich Krotov, at that time a junior investigator for the city police, whose diary was accidentally preserved in the private collection of his grandson, wrote, "On March 3rd, a report was received about the disappearance of the Nikolai family. Peter Semenovic, his wife Anna, and their two children, boys aged 8 and 10. Neighbors claim that the whole family went to the evening performance of the circus and did not return. Their apartment was left open, with an unfinished dinner on the table, as if they were going to return. This is already the 7th report of people disappearing after visiting the circus. The authorities see no connection, but I feel something is not right here. The longer I studied the documents, the stranger the circumstances seemed. The Orloff brothers' circus was not registered in any official document. No one knew where they came from. The artists never left the circus grounds during the day, only at night. Some of them went into the city for shopping, as they explained, but several witnesses said they saw the artists returning with heavy bags, and it didn't seem like they contained food. I was especially interested in the testimony of Grigory Petrovich Sokolov, a night watchman at a warehouse not far from where the circus was located. In the interrogation report of March 20th, 1923, he said, "Every night, around 2 o'clock, several people in dark clothing come out of the back of the circus. Sometimes they carry empty bags, and they return with full and heavy ones. One day, one of the bags tore, and I saw that there was some kind of clothing inside, dirty, torn. It seemed to me that there were bloodstains on it, but I can't say for sure. When I called out to them, they froze, and then one turned to me. His face, it wasn't quite human, like a mask, but moving. I got scared and hid. I didn't call out to them anymore. Sokolov's testimony was ignored by the police. He was considered a drunk with a rich imagination, but the next testimony could not be so easily dismissed. On March 25, 1923, Evdokia Stepanovna Glukova, who lived in the house opposite the circus, came to the police with a story that made one's hair stand on end. My apartment is on the second floor. The windows face directly onto the circus. For the past few weeks, I've been smelling a terrible odor, especially at night. Sweetish, nauseating like rotting meat, but not quite. I thought maybe an animal had died somewhere, but last night I couldn't sleep and was standing by the window. I saw two men come out of a small door on the side of the main entrance to the circus, carrying a large cauldron between them. They poured its contents into a ditch behind the tent. In the moonlight, I could clearly see that the liquid was dark, thick. And then I saw something white flash in that muck. It was a human hand, I'm ready to swear. A child's hand, small. They noticed me in the window, and one of them pointed in my direction. I immediately jumped away from the window and hid. I didn't sleep all night. I was afraid they would come for me. Glukova's testimony finally made the police pay attention to the strange circus. Investigator Krotov received permission for a search, which was scheduled for the evening of March 26th. But the circus seemed to sense danger. From the report of Leonid Krotov, arriving at the scene at 7:00 p.m., we found that the main performance had already begun. Despite the cold evening, it was unusually hot inside the tent. The air was filled with strange aromas, a mixture of oriental incense, roasted meat, and something else that I could not identify. There were many people in the audience, mostly working-class families with children. A man calling himself the Great Orlov, the owner of the circus, was performing in the arena. Tall, thin, with an unnaturally pale face and deep-set eyes. He demonstrated tricks with fire that did not burn his hands. When he noticed us, something changed in his gaze. He finished the performance earlier than usual and announced a short break before a special performance for the chosen. While the audience went out for a break, we began searching the back rooms. What the police discovered exceeded the worst expectations. Behind the main tent was another, smaller tent, hidden from the public's eyes. Inside this second tent was an improvised kitchen with huge cauldrons. The smell here was unbearable. A mixture of burnt meat, spices, and decay. But the real horror awaited in the underground premises. Investigator Krotov wrote, "Under the main tent, we discovered a hatch leading to an underground room. Going down the stairs, we found ourselves in a system of tunnels dug under the circus. In the first room were cages, small, no bigger than dog kennels. In some, there were still people, emaciated with traces of beatings and burns. They were so weak that they could barely speak. In the second room, we found what can only be described as a butchering area. Tables, knives, saws, hooks hanging from the ceiling, and blood everywhere. Blood that had already darkened, ingrained in the earthen floor. In the third room were personal belongings. Clothing, shoes, jewelry, documents. We counted things belonging to at least 37 different people. In the fourth room were barrels of human bones, neatly cleaned of meat. And in the last room, we discovered the most terrible thing. An altar covered with strange symbols with traces of dried blood and small figures carved from human bones. This find shocked even the most seasoned police officers. But the real shock awaited them when they returned to the main tent. The performance had resumed but had changed beyond recognition. In the arena stood a huge cauldron, and around it danced the circus performers in strange masks before a chosen audience. Those who remained for the special performance were handed plates with steaming meat stew. From the testimony of Anatoly Rubtsov, one of the policemen who participated in the operation. When we burst back into the tent, the Great Orlov was standing in the center of the arena and saying something in an incomprehensible language. Seeing us, he showed neither fear nor surprise. Instead, he smiled and said, "You're late. The ritual has already begun." After these words, the artists threw off their masks, and we saw their real faces, disfigured, with unnaturally stretched mouths in which there were too many teeth, sharp as those of predators. They moved with inhuman speed. 3 of our men died before we could open fire. In the ensuing battle, Most of the circus performers were killed, but some, including the great Orlov himself, managed to escape. When reinforcements arrived on the scene, they discovered a horrifying scene. Many of the chosen spectators had already tasted the treat and were now writhing in agony. As it turned out later, the meat was poisoned with some unknown poison. The few who survived said that before the meal began, Orlov spoke of an ancient ritual through which participants would gain immortality by eating the flesh of innocents. The investigation into the Orlov brothers' circus case continued for several months. It was established that similar disappearances had occurred in other cities where this circus had stopped. In Moscow, Kiev, Warsaw, and Berlin. Everywhere, the scheme was the same. A bright circus appeared on the outskirts, attracted the public with free performances for the poor, and then the disappearances began, but never before had they acted so openly and boldly as in St. Petersburg. I was especially interested in one document found in the personal belongings of the great Orlov, an ancient book in an unknown language with illustrations of cannibalistic rituals. Experts determined that some pages were written in a dialect belonging to a vanished Finno-Ugric tribe that lived on the territory of modern Karelia. The book described a cult of soul eaters, believing that by eating the flesh of the victim, they absorbed its life force and memories. From the conclusion of the expert ethnographer Viktor Samilov, the cult of soul eaters was considered to have completely disappeared back in the 16th century when the last of its followers were executed by order of Ivan the Terrible. However, some sources indicate that some of the cultists fled to the north, where they continued to practice their rituals in deep secrecy. According to their beliefs, properly prepared human flesh gives not only longevity but also the ability to take on the appearance of the person eaten. Children and young women, whose life force was considered the most powerful, were especially valued. The ritual required that the victim be eaten alive, starting with the limbs, so that their suffering and fear would flavor the flesh. What particularly struck me about this story was the complete absence of any information about the capture of the great Orlov and the other escaped artists. In official documents, the case simply ends in June of 1923 with the note, "Investigation suspended due to the absence of suspects. No wanted notices, no further attempts to find these monsters in human form." Only in the personal diary of investigator Krotov did I find a hint of the reason for such a strange conclusion to the case. Today, I was summoned to a special department, ordered to cease the investigation, and hand over all materials. When I asked for the reason, I was told that the case was of state importance and would be handled at a higher level, but I could see in the eyes of the head of the special department that they were afraid of what we might find or of who was behind this circus of death. After the conversation, I checked the lists of the missing again and noticed something that had escaped me before. Among the first to disappear were people who had some connection to the new government, small cogs in a big machine, but still, what if the purpose of this circus was not just murder for the sake of an ancient ritual? What if it was something more, an attempt to infiltrate, to penetrate the structure of power, if they can indeed take on the appearance of their eaten victims? At this point, Krotov's records end. From his personal file, which I managed to find in the archive, I learned that a week after this entry, he was transferred to the Far East, and a month later, he died under mysterious circumstances. The deeper I delved into the story, the more questions I had. I decided to trace the further fate of the surviving victims of the circus. Most of them died within a year of their release, officially from various diseases, but looking through the medical reports, I noticed a strange pattern. They all developed the same symptoms: progressive memory loss, strange visions, convulsions, and then complete physical exhaustion, as if something was devouring them from the inside. From the diary of Elena Nikolaeva, one of the rescued victims, "They pulled us out of the cages, but I feel that part of me remained there under the circus. Every night, I see their faces, pale, with stretched mouths, full of sharp teeth. They smile at me and say that they will soon return. I hear their voices even when I'm not sleeping. Sometimes it seems to me that they are already here, inside me. The doctors say that this is a consequence of the shock, but I know the truth. That night, when we were fed, I ate what they gave me, and now they are growing in me." Elena died 2 months after writing this entry. Doctors were puzzled by the cause of death. Her body was literally decaying from the inside. Organs failed one after another, and at the autopsy, strange formations resembling tumors were found in her stomach and intestines, but with clear signs of organized structure, almost like the beginnings of organs. Tissue samples were sent for research, but the results were never made public. The only survivor of those who were rescued from under the circus was a boy who was about 10 years old at the time of the events. His name was not indicated in the documents, only the initials SM. His case was special. The child was found in a separate room, chained to the wall, but unlike the other prisoners, he did not look emaciated. On the contrary, the boy was well-fed and had no visible injuries. After his release, he did not say a word and was placed in an orphanage for orphans, where he remained until adulthood. I managed to find the archival records of this orphanage, and what I read made my blood run cold. Educators noted the boy's strange behavior. He never cried, rarely slept, and showed extraordinary interest in anatomy. He could watch insects for hours, caught mice and birds, and once he was caught dismembering a live cat. When asked why he was doing this, the boy replied, "I want to know how they are built inside, so that I can become them later." At the age of 17, SM disappeared from the orphanage. The police report stated that the search yielded no results, but it was suggested that the boy had run away to join a circus troupe that was touring the city at the time. And this is where the story takes a sinister turn. Studying the archives of various cities in Russia and Europe from 1930 to 1950, I began to notice mentions of a traveling circus appearing in small towns and villages. The names were different: Circus Chudis, the Great Northern Circus, the Romanov Brothers Circus, but the descriptions matched unusually. A bright tent, artists with pale faces, strange performances after the main program, and always after their departure, missing people were found. The last mention of such a circus that I found was in a newspaper from a small Siberian town, dated 1953. The article told of a strange incident. Yesterday evening, during a performance by a traveling circus, a strong thunderstorm suddenly began. Lightning struck the main tent, causing a fire. Despite the efforts of firefighters, the circus burned to the ground. Miraculously, none of the spectators were injured, but unfortunately, all the artists died in the fire. The strangeness of the situation lies in the fact that, according to eyewitnesses, the artists did not try to escape. They continued their performance even as flames raged around them. After this incident, mentions of the circus with pale-faced artists disappear from the documents. It would seem that the story had ended and the ancient cult had been destroyed by fire. But is that really the case? In 2018, while researching materials for another article, I came across a series of notes about people who had gone missing in small towns along the Trans-Siberian Railway. The scheme was frighteningly familiar. The disappearances began after the appearance of a traveling amusement park in the city, bright lights, music, affordable prices, special performances for the chosen, and again, reports from local residents mentioned strange smells and artists with unnaturally pale faces. From an interview with Nina Semenovna Karpova, a resident of the city of Tayshet, they came last spring and set up their park on the wasteland behind the railway station. Carousels, swings, a house of horrors, a shooting range, everything as usual, but there was something strange about them. All the artists were very pale, as if they had never seen the sun, and they were always smiling, even when they thought no one was watching them, and this smell was especially strong. It was near their vans where they were cooking food, Swedish, heavy. My granddaughter went there with friends and did not return. The police said that she probably ran away from home like many teenagers, but I know that she would never have done that. And a week after her disappearance, the park left, and only then did we learn that 5 more children from neighboring houses had disappeared. I tried to trace the route of this amusement park, but it seemed to dissolve after Tayshet. No official documents, no permits to perform in other cities. Like a ghost, it appeared and disappeared, leaving behind only pain and unanswered questions. Perhaps the most alarming discovery in my investigation was a find made completely by chance. In an antique shop in a small town in the Urals, I saw an old poster that immediately caught my attention. The Great Orlov Circus. Unforgettable experiences for the whole family. The catchy headline read. On the yellowed paper was depicted a tall, thin man in a top hat, with a pale face and deep-set eyes. The shop owner said that the poster dated back to the early 90s and had been found in an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. "And you know what's the strangest thing?" the old man said as I was about to leave. "That circus really did come here, and after it left, several people disappeared in the city, mostly the homeless and lonely old people. Back then, in the 90s, no one paid much attention to it, times were tough, but my late wife worked at the city hospital, and she told me a strange thing. That week, when the circus was in town, they brought in a man with severe poisoning, and before his death, he raved and kept repeating that he had been fed human meat at a special performance. Of course, everyone decided that it was just the delirium of a dying man. When I carefully examined the poster, my heart skipped a beat. At the very bottom, in small print, was printed a special performance for The Chosen, after the main program by personal invitation only, and below these words was depicted a symbol exactly the same as on the altar found under the circus tent in St. Petersburg in 1923. This find haunted me. If the circus really did revive in the 90s, where is it now, and how many more victims remain unknown? I began to methodically review reports of missing persons in small towns in Russia over the past 30 years, looking for patterns, and discovered a frightening picture. Every 5 to 7 years, in different regions of the country, there were series of disappearances, coinciding with the tours of various traveling circuses and amusement parks. The names were always different, but the scheme remained unchanged. Bright advertising, affordable prices, special performances for The Chosen, and always children among the missing. I was especially interested in a case that occurred in 2015 in a small town near Novosibirsk. There, after the departure of the Dream Traveling Amusement Park, 3 children from dysfunctional families disappeared. The police did not attach any importance to this. Children from such families often run away, but local journalist Igor Semenov began his own investigation and discovered strange details. All 3 children visited the Room of Wonders, an attraction that was not listed in the park's official program and operated only after dark. From Igor Semenov's article in the local newspaper, the Room of Wonders was located in a black van without windows, standing in the far corner of the park. No advertising, no hawkers. People only found out about it from those who had already been inside. According to eyewitnesses, visitors were greeted by a tall, thin man in an old-fashioned costume, calling himself Dr. Orlov. Inside the van, supposedly, each visitor saw what they dreamed of most, be it a long-dead relative, a lost love, or the fulfillment of their most cherished desire. How exactly this illusion was created is unknown. Some suggest the use of hallucinogenic substances or advanced holographic technologies, but everyone who came out of the Room of Wonders described the same feeling, as if part of their soul had remained inside. Igor Semenov continued his investigation, trying to find other witnesses who had been to the mysterious Room of Wonders, but 2 weeks after the publication of the article, he disappeared. His car was found on the highway 100 kilometers from the city, with the engine running and the door open. Inside, they found his voice recorder with a last recording that made one's hair stand on end. The recording begins with the noise of the road and Semenov's voice. July 23rd, 21:30. I'm driving along the Novosibirsk-Tomsk highway. I just received a strange call from a person who introduced himself as an employee of the Dream Amusement Park. He said that he wanted to share information about the Room of Wonders and the missing children. We agreed to meet at the gas station at the 120th kilometer. It sounds suspicious, but this could be a breakthrough in the investigation. The noise of the road continues for a few more minutes. Then you hear the car stop, the door slam, steps on the gravel, silence, then Semenov's voice, now alarmed. Strange. There's no one at the gas station. No one at all, not even the operator. The lights are on, but it's dark inside. I'll check now. Steps are heard. The door creaks. A long pause, then quick, frightened steps and heavy breathing. Semenov speaks disjointedly, clearly frightened. My God, they're here. I saw them inside. They're not people, their faces, God, those mouths, too many teeth, they were eating someone. Right there inside the gas station, it seems they didn't notice me. I need to leave immediately and call the police. The sound of running, the car door slams, the engine starts. Semenov says quickly, I need to get out of here. They're connected to the park. Now I'm sure that these disappearances are not just happening. They choose their victims, lure them into this damned room of wonders, and then oh crap. The screech of brakes, a crash, silence. Then a strange rustling sound, as if someone is approaching the voice recorder. A whisper too quiet to make out the words, and the last thing heard on the recording is a voice, completely unlike Semenov's voice, low, hissing with unnatural intonations. We always find those who know too much. The room of wonders awaits you, Igor. You will see your most cherished desires, and we will see your fears and taste your soul. The investigation into the disappearance of Igor Semenov yielded no results. The police considered that he had become a victim of an ordinary robbery or had staged his disappearance for the sake of sensation. The recording from the voice recorder was considered staged, the article in the newspaper was forgotten, and the children remained on the list of the missing. But I could not simply let go of this story. Too many coincidences connected it with the Orloff brothers' circus from 1923, the Room of Wonders, Dr. Orloff, disappearance, cannibalism, and that terrible, whispering voice on the recording, so similar to the description of the great Orloff's voice from the witnesses' testimonies. I decided to go to that town near Novosibirsk to gather more information. A new shock awaited me on the spot. No one remembered the Dream amusement park, the missing children, or the journalist Igor Semenov. Even the local newspaper archive had no mention of the story, as if someone had methodically erased all traces, all memories. Only one elderly woman, a former teacher at the local school, vaguely recalled something similar. Yes, there was such a strange park, and children disappeared, then 3 from dysfunctional families, but no one really looked for them. They decided that they had run away. And then, for some reason, everyone forgot about it, as if nothing had happened. Only I remember because one of the missing, Misha Korzakov, was my student, a talented boy despite all the problems in his family. And you know what's strange? A year after his disappearance, I received a postcard without a return address, without a signature, just a photograph of a circus and the inscription, "I became part of the miracle." The handwriting was Misha's. I'd recognize it anywhere. This postcard became a new lead for me. I started searching for information about modern circuses and amusement parks using the slogan, "Become part of the miracle." And I found a small traveling park called Magic of Wonders, touring small towns in Russia and neighboring countries. There was nothing unusual in their advertising. Standard rides, carousels, a shooting gallery, a haunted house. But in some photographs on social networks, a careful observer could notice a black van without windows standing away from the main area, and the same symbol that was on the Orloff Circus poster and on the altar in the dungeon of the St. Petersburg Circus, drawn almost imperceptibly on the door of the van. According to the schedule, the Magic of Wonders was to perform in a small town in the Leningrad region, just 2 hours' drive from St. Petersburg, the following weekend. I decided to go there to see everything with my own eyes. The Magic of Wonders park turned out to be exactly as I expected. Small, slightly shabby, but still able to attract attention in a small town where there isn't much entertainment. Bright lights, loud music, the smell of cotton candy and popcorn. Ordinary visitors, families with children, teenagers, pensioners. I spent the whole day watching the park operate, studying the staff, trying to notice something unusual. Nothing suspicious. Ordinary workers, tired but friendly. But when it started to get dark, the atmosphere changed. Most families with small children left. Mostly teenagers and adults remained. The music became quieter, more subdued, with some strange notes, as if the instruments were slightly out of tune. And in the far corner of the park, I noticed that same black van without windows. It stood in the shade of the trees, almost unlit. No sign, no advertising, just a small symbol on the door, glowing in the dark with phosphorescent paint. I approached, trying not to attract attention. At the door of the van stood a tall, thin man in an old-fashioned suit and top hat. His face was pale, with deep-set eyes that seemed to absorb the light. He wasn't soliciting visitors, he was just standing and watching the people passing by. From time to time, he would beckon someone with a gesture. And strangely, people approached as if hypnotized, spoke to him for a few minutes, and then either left or entered the van. I decided to risk it and get closer. My heart was pounding like crazy, but curiosity and the desire to uncover the secret were stronger than fear. I casually walked past the van, pretending to just stroll through the park. The man in the top hat followed me with his eyes, but didn't call out. I circled back and returned, this time stopping nearby, pretending to look at other rides. I heard him talking to a young girl, clearly from a troubled family. Cheap clothes, traces of beatings on her arms, a vacant look. In the Room of Wonders, you will see everything you dream of, my child, he said in a voice that was both soft and piercing. All your desires, all your hopes. You can become whoever you want. Forget about all the problems. Become part of our family. Become part of the miracle. The girl looked at him with wide eyes, nodding as if in a trance, and then, without a word, entered the black van. The door closed silently behind her. I waited, hiding behind the nearby ride, waited for her to come out. 10 minutes passed, 20, half an hour. No one came out of the Room of Wonders, but through a service door on the side of the van, they carried out a large, heavy bag, clearly with something inside. The bag was loaded into an inconspicuous van without license plates, and it immediately drove away. My fear reached its peak. Everything matched the story of the Orloff brothers' circus. The same scheme, the same details, the same feeling of unnatural, inexplicable horror. I had to do something. I had to stop it. But what can one person do against an ancient cult that has existed for hundreds of years? I decided to act. I took out my phone and started filming everything that was happening around the van. The man in the top hat, the service door from which the bags were being carried out, the faces of the park employees. And then, gathering courage, I approached the man in the top hat directly. "Hello," I said, trying to make my voice sound confident. "I'm writing an article about unusual attractions. Could you tell me about the Room of Wonders? What exactly do people see inside?" He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my blood run cold. These weren't the eyes of a human. Too deep, too dark, like bottomless wells. And in their depths something was moving, something alive and hungry. "Everyone sees what they deserve," he replied, and his voice seemed to penetrate directly into my brain, bypassing my ears. "And you see too much. I know who you are. I know what you're looking for. You're digging into the past that should remain buried." He took a step towards me and his face seemed to change. For a moment, I saw non-human features, something else with a stretched mouth full of sharp teeth. I recoiled, barely holding back a scream. "The great Orloff died over 100 years ago," he continued, and his voice now had a hiss in it. "But his work lives on, the ritual continues. We find new followers, new bodies, and you could become one of us. You could learn secrets you never suspected. You could live forever." He held out his hand, and I saw that his fingers were too long, with sharp, claw-like nails. "Come with me to the Room of Wonders. I'll show you everything you want to know. All the secrets of the circus, the Orloff brothers, everything that happened to those missing children, the whole truth." I understood that it was a trap. I understood that if I entered that van, I wouldn't come out, at least not as a human. Something told me that the strange man in the top hat knew more about me than I had told him, as if he were reading my thoughts, as if he had been following my investigation from the very beginning. "Thank you for the offer, but I have to go," I said, slowly retreating. "Maybe another time." His smile widened, unnaturally wider, as if his mouth was stretching beyond human capabilities. "There won't be another time," he hissed. "We don't like it when someone knows too much. We don't like it when someone tells our secrets. You were going to tell, weren't you? Write an article, reveal the truth, but no one will believe you. No one ever believes." I turned and quickly walked away, feeling his gaze between my shoulder blades, like physical pressure. I knew I had to leave immediately, warn the police, do something to stop this horror. But I also knew that this man, or whatever it was, wouldn't let me just leave. Reaching my car in the parking lot, I immediately felt that something was wrong. The door was unlocked, although I clearly remembered locking it. Inside, there was a strange smell, sweetish, metallic. On the passenger seat lay a postcard, exactly the same as the one the teacher had received. A circus in the photograph and the inscription become part of the miracle. I started the car. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the steering wheel. I drove out of the parking lot and headed towards the highway leading back to St. Petersburg. In the rearview mirror, I saw the amusement park gradually disappearing into the darkness, and it seemed to me that among the lights I could distinguish the figure in the top hat, standing motionless and watching me go. On the way, I called the police, told them about my suspicions about the missing girl, about the strange van and the bags. The officer on duty listened to me politely, but without much interest. He promised to pass the information on to the patrol officers. I knew that most likely no one would come, or would come too late. And even if they did find something suspicious, the magic of wonders would simply disappear, as the Orloff brothers' circus had disappeared every time questions arose about it. That night I couldn't sleep. I checked the locks on the doors and windows every half hour, flinching at every rustle. And when I finally dozed off towards morning, I had a strange dream. I was standing in the middle of a circus arena, surrounded by spectators sitting in the dark. I couldn't make out their faces. I only saw the glint of eyes. In front of me stood the great Orloff, exactly as in the old photograph from the archive, but his face was constantly changing, turning into the faces of other people. Investigator Krotov, journalist Simayanov, the missing children. And at some point, I saw my own face in place of his. "You are already part of us," he said in the voices of all these people at once. "You have eaten our food, you have inhaled our smell, you have looked into our eyes. Now we are growing inside you." I woke up in a cold sweat and realized with horror that I had a strange taste in my mouth, sweetish, metallic. The same smell that I smelled in my car, the same smell that, according to witnesses, came from the circus kitchen in 1923. The next day, I went to the police to find out if they had checked the amusement park. To my surprise, the duty officer looked at me in confusion and said that no report had been received from me. Moreover, there was no information in the database about the Magic of Wonders amusement park supposedly operating in that town. According to official data, there was nothing at all there on those weekends. I drove back to that town to prove that the park existed, but in the place where the Magic of Wonders should have been, there was only a wasteland overgrown with grass and weeds. No trace that there had ever been an amusement park here. The locals I questioned looked at me like I was crazy and claimed that there hadn't been a park here for many years. In desperation, I took out my phone to show the video I had taken yesterday, but all the files were corrupted. Instead of the video, the screen only showed flickering and interference. In one of the frames, it seemed to me that I could distinguish a pale face, with a stretched mouth and two large eyes, but the image was so distorted that I couldn't be sure. Returning home, I found that my apartment had been ransacked. Nothing was stolen, but all my records about the Orloff brothers' circus, all the documents that I had collected over months of investigation, had disappeared. All that remained was the postcard found in the car with the inscription, "Become part of the miracle." I began to notice other strange things. At night, I heard the sounds of circus music, although there was no circus nearby. Sometimes, passing by a mirror, I saw that my reflection moved with a slight delay, as if not quite in sync with me. And one morning I found a strange mark on my hand, a small symbol, the same as on the door of the Room of Wonders, as if burned on the skin. Doctors found nothing unusual, either in my blood or on an MRI of my brain. The psychiatrist suggested that I was developing a paranoid disorder due to stress and advised me to rest, perhaps change the subject of my research. But I knew that it was all real. I knew that the Orloff brothers' circus, or the Magic of Wonders, or whatever it was called, really existed and that it had somehow penetrated my life, my consciousness. The last straw was a call to my mobile phone in the middle of the night. The number was not identified. When I answered, circus music came from the speaker, and then that same hissing voice. "You can still become part of the miracle. We are waiting for you. The Room of Wonders is always open for you." The next day, I gathered everything I needed and left the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I changed my phone, deleted all my accounts on social networks. I hoped that if I disappeared from sight, they would lose interest in me and leave me alone. But I know that they are still out there, a traveling circus or amusement park changing its name and appearance, but always with a room of wonders, always with pale-faced performers, always with an ancient ritual of cannibalism. They continue their journey through small towns, collecting their terrible harvest, and I know that one day they will find me. In the meantime, I am writing this story as a warning to everyone who may encounter a bright circus or amusement park that has appeared as if from nowhere. If you see a black van without windows, if you hear an invitation to a special performance for the chosen ones, if you notice a strange symbol on the doors or posters, run as far as you can, and never enter the room of wonders. Sometimes, at night, I still hear circus music. Sometimes, in my dreams, I see pale faces with stretched mouths full of sharp teeth. And sometimes, looking in the mirror, I notice that my smile becomes a little wider than it should be for a human. And I wonder, what if they did get to me? What if part of them already lives in me, growing, waiting for its hour? What if I have already become part of the miracle?